Hello everyone, welcome back for part 2 of the Apocalyst Review of Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker. Look, to start out part 2, I will be fair, as I always am, that I thought having a scene with a giant piece of wrecked Death Star sticking out of the ocean was pretty cool. I'm not sure how such a big piece survived the explosion once the reactor was destroyed by Lando in Return of the Jedi, or how it stayed together so well after spiraling through Endor's atmosphere and then crashing into its surface, but it was pretty sweet nonetheless. I kind of wish we could have seen the Ewoks, but that's okay. What if they would have shown some mangy ace Ewoks, man? I mean gnarly, nasty beasts that were pissed people in the midst of a galactic conflict were once again coming back to their planet. That would have been awesome. Anyways, though, I also liked how you see empty stormtrooper helmets strewn about in the wreckage of the Death Star. Why did Threepio get his memory back when he sacrificed himself? Which he did so that he could read the writing on the Sith dagger, because his programming wouldn't let him do it unless he was rewritten to override that restriction. So what a noble sacrifice it was, too, again, so he could translate something on a dagger. When deciding what to do, he specifically said that R2-D2 didn't have backup files. They're supposed to be counterparts, so it makes sense that R2-D2 would have C-3PO's backup files if he hadn't bloody pointed out specifically that he didn't. Since they are counterparts, which means they are extremely close, like two sides of the same coin, wouldn't 3PO know if R2 had copied his memory or not? It really negated the sacrifice he was supposed to be making too, when R2-D2 gave it back to him. One other thing is that, before his memory was temporarily wiped, he said he wanted to take one last look at his friends. Friends? Friends? What friends? Did you see the way they treated him throughout the entire movie? Poe in particular treated him like an expendable robot, not a friend. I don't hold it against Poe. I mean, it's easy to forget that 3PO is actually a robot, and Luke was going to trade him and R2 both to Jabba the Hutt in exchange for Han. But before 3PO to say that, it seems like they were trying to stretch their association into something it really wasn't. Rose Taco Tico. Rose Tico. Yes. Oh, yes. Listen, I get that she wasn't exactly a popular character from The Last Jedi, to say the least. But like her or not, she was more or less a main character. I mean, if they're so worried about what people didn't like and not continuing it, why even make this beastified movie? It wasn't just Rose Tico people didn't like from The Last Jedi. No one liked that garbage movie or how it shat all over the canon like it was a public toilet. Let me just take a moment to say thank you, Rian Johnson. Minus the thank you part! So now, since they didn't have the balls to get rid of her, they kept her in as a side character with almost no lines and seemingly scrapped the love connection that she had with Finn. Essentially, Jar Jar Abrams is doing to her what George Lucas did with Jar Jar Binks in episodes 2 and 3. Supposedly, George Lucas intended, originally, for Jar Jar Binks to be a bad ace Sith in disguise. But after seeing all the fan hate towards him, relegated him instead to a small side character for the last 2 movies in that trilogy. Anyways, didn't she plan to win the war living by her deep thought from The Last Jedi, which is not by fighting what we hate, but saving what we love? Now it seems that her and Finn barely even knows each other. Maybe they broke up between films and decided that they would be better off as acquaintances rather than lovers or even friends? Who knows? I wonder what her motivation is now. I mean, what does she love that she's fighting to save in The Rise of Skywalker? The world, or in this case the galaxy, may never know. So why did Leia only disappear at nearly the exact same time that Kylo Ren died? That made no sense to me. I mean, she'd already been laying there dead for a while at that point. I get that they were trying hard to show some kind of last-minute connection between the two, but for the love of the light side of the Force, what would have caused that? Was this some long-forgotten Force power that allows you to die/disappear at the same time as your son, or your mom, depending on which one of them initiated this Force technique? Nothing about Kylo Ren's death makes any sense! He was still totally fine. Sure, he got Force thrown off a cliff by the Emperor, but he just climbed out of the hole from whence he was tossed like a rag doll, and got back to Rey with nothing more than a slight limp. Last I checked, having a limp is generally not a fatal wound. An annoying flesh wound at best. And again, I have to emphasize, they didn't have to do it this way! He didn't have to drop dead for literally no reason. I don't mean sacrificing his life for some weak cause. I mean literally nothing caused him to die. Oh yeah, never mind. It was Rey's kiss of death technique that got him. And obviously, one of the key components is that it makes the victim's mom's corpse disappear. An odd technique indeed. Probably why the Jedi of old never utilized it in their battles with the Sith. They thought bringing someone's mom into the fight was childish and inappropriate. They had standards, dang it! Ah, yes. Force techniques. Now, things like lightsabers and necklaces can be teleported through the very fabric of time and space itself to any point anywhere across the galaxy. At one point, Rey, who had brought 2 lightsabers with her for some reason, teleports one to Kylo Ren, who had no lightsaber after throwing it away in the middle of the ocean for some reason, who walked unarmed into a fight outnumbered 20-1 or something right when he needed it. He then fights what I guess is the Knights of Ren, who use normal axes and spears, not lightsabers. I have friends who tell me that's who they are. The movies did little to nothing to highlight anything about them. Kylo then kills them with the greatest of ease, nearly as easily as him and Rey dispatched Emperor Snoke's Elite Guard in The Last Jedi. Why didn't they, the Knights of Ren that is, have lightsabers? I don't get it. Look, before I go into my next point, I want to say that I personally was happy to see them work in more abilities with the Force. It makes it seem like being a Jedi and wielding the Force means you're actually a force to be reckoned with and have pretty cool abilities. One of my big complaints about the prequel trilogy is that the Jedi seemed to me like they weren't really anything special, aside from wielding cool lightsabers, that is, and they definitely died way too easy. They couldn't even sense the Emperor's intentions or that he was a Sith while he was right in their midst. So while I like seeing Rey and Kylo for that matter, actually doing neat stuff with the Force, it's the fact that until this movie, Rey was doing ridiculous stuff, better than any actual Jedi I've ever seen, with no possible way of knowing how to do it, that has really bothered me. Despite anything cool they may be doing, it had, especially in episodes 7 and 8, destroyed the suspension of disbelief for me, and just made Rey's near perfection seem silly, not awesome. What do the writers think she is, the second coming of Superman? Maybe that's what Flying Space Leia was in The Last Jedi. So then you see the Emperor, who is 7 feet tall and has killed rebels by the hundreds, force blast the entire rebel resistance fleet with fireballs from his eyes and bolts of lightning from his arse, like he's Braveheart's The Legend of William Wallace come alive or something, all like it ain't no thing. Actually, he was normal sized, and it was just a ridiculous amount of lightning from his old gnarled hands consuming the galactic sky and the entire resistance fleet like it was the intergalactic 4th of July, temporarily disabling them. But then they come back fully armed and operational and pretty much unaffected by being force lightning blasted. But after this over-the-top and absurd display by the Emperor, he then turns his attention and dark force lightning entirely on Rey, who stops it with a lightsaber she's holding in just one hand? Yeah, one-handed, because she's a bad arse. The Emperor just blasted an entire fleet, yet can't seem to get past one person holding a lightsaber using just one hand? Huh. She probably needed her other hand to scratch her arse. Even in the middle of fights, bro. Heroes have itches to scratch too. Piss, man. Though yes, she eventually does use 2 hands and deflects the Emperor's shiest back at him, electrocuting him to death like she almost did to Chewie. So, what is the Emperor still doing alive? I could accept the Emperor being back if it had been done right, because as a huge fan of Star Wars since I was a kid, I read most of the books and comics. They felt like Star Wars. Anyways, in the expanded universe, which is not canon anymore, the Emperor came back a handful of times. He was cloned in those stories, though. I could accept it because it was well implemented. Here he was never mentioned before this, and no explanation was really given. I'm just baffled that it was implemented so poorly. Unlike in the expanded universe that had good writing and build-up, it was hard to believe seeing it here. As I already alluded to, it just seemed like a last-minute shoo-in because they had no other ideas and the true main villain was already wasted in The Last Jedi. As much as I hated The Last Jedi, I truly think that once they got to that point, the sequel films would have been better served had they just stopped for a while after The Last Jedi and not made this film. I mean, there's nothing that says that these movies have to be trilogies. Something else that doesn't make sense is that this entire Imperial fleet would have had required an insane amount of money, manpower, and resources. Where do these people manning this giant fleet of Star Destroyers surrounding the Sith homeworld come from? Do they get to leave the orbit of the Sith planet on leave when they're on vacation? Did the Sith world have the tax revenue to pay for all this? Why did they need this satellite to guide them away from the Sith world? I get that there was this seriously bad stuff around it that had to be navigated, but these are ships that navigate the galaxy. Why wasn't any information they needed to get out of this Sith H-hole already uploaded? Why was the Resistance able to conveniently get a heads up to their countdown? With this information, that I would guess many Bothans died to get to them. The Resistance was then able to land space horses, yeah, that's right, space horses, on the ship with the satellite and do a cavalry charge like a cohort of angry World War I style Prussians that overwhelmed the Empire's, or First Order, whatever it was, defenses, and get to the satellite. Again, felt like a mission in a video game. Why were space horses able to breathe in space? Why were the humans riding them instead of just flying ships to shoot it? Holy crap, it's getting tough to follow the nonsense at this point. So, getting back to Leia, supposedly all the scenes where you see the elderly Leia's face are actually her back when she was alive. That wasn't CGI. As I'm sure everyone knows, the actress playing her, Carrie Fisher, unfortunately passed away near the end of 2016, which was, thankfully at least, after filming for The Last Jedi had concluded. They had enough stock footage from previous movies to make her role in this film work. I have to say, they did a pretty impressive job with it. It looked totally natural. You couldn't tell that it wasn't filmed just for those scenes. Bravo to the team that made that happen so beautifully and with so much respect to the late and great actress. Why, for the love of Pete, didn't they just bring back the Old Republic and have at least a few Jedi that Luke had trained? That's what they did in the expanded universe, and it was cool. Very cool. Have you noticed that most of the video games involve Jedi in some way? I certainly have. Fans like the Jedi. Why not bring them back? I mean, Luke was around. What in the H else was he doing this whole time? What a huge missed opportunity this was. And instead of having a rabble of random ships come in to save the day at the end of the film, why didn't they have the New Republic fleet show up, possibly led by a few Jedi, and engage in an epic battle 9 movies in the making? Not having the New Republic around was another huge missed opportunity. How am I supposed to believe that random ships just happen to mass at the exact same time and are able to destroy a fleet of ships built for war that are strong enough to destroy planets? It really took me out of the movie and destroyed my suspension of disbelief to the point that they might as well have just broken the fourth wall. I mean, to me, it just seemed ridiculous. That brings me to one of my last points. Star Destroyers can now destroy planets. Yeah. Okay, so now there is no point in having Death Stars? They have been rendered obsolete at best, pointless at worst. This, to me, doesn't seem like an escalation. It's a cheapening of all the struggles that came before it, like destroying Death Stars. This is one of the things I hated the most about this movie. What's next? Unholy Muke. The Millennium Falcon will be able to obliterate an entire asteroid field with a weapon like this and have no more need to navigate it? Cheap and heavily laden with horse scheist. Alright, so I'd have to say, I'd recommend Jumanji The Next Level over this sack of crap. I mean, if you're a Star Wars fan like I am, or was, you have to watch it. It may be work at this point, but I get it. It's just something you have to do, whether you like it or not. At least I left the theater after watching Jumanji feeling good. Rise of Skywalker left me feeling confused, cold, hungry for something food couldn't satisfy, alone, and drowning in crushing disappointment, figuratively speaking, of course. The disappointment began for me with The Force Awakens and kept spiraling like a ball of dookie rolling down a hill, culminating with Episode 9. Star Wars The Rise of a Palpatine who now calls herself a Skywalker gets the Matthew Bruschi seal of garbage / horse scheist. I'd say 2.5 stars out of 10. There were some cool visuals, and I'm going to give it a few points for the things I did like, such as actually making Rey train for once, and her being Palp's granddaughter actually being a cool twist, which is why I'm not giving this train wreck a 0. But there was no logical development from episode 7 to 8 to this, and nothing really made sense. Good riddance, sequel trilogy. You jacked up the canon and succeeded in disappointing nearly everyone that has much as even a casual interest in the franchise. If that was your goal, then well done, Lucasfilm / Disney. Consider the huge dump I took this morning as my way of saying thanks. This concludes the Apocalyst review of Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker. Thanks for watching.